The top recruiting class in 2025 currently belongs to Ohio State. Can it stay that way? Brian Smith, our Lockdown Recruiting Insider here, joining me on the show, brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. Can the Buckeyes hold on to that top spot for the next cycle, Brian?
I think they can, but there's still a lot of battles to win. Obviously, getting Delane is great. He may be the best safety / he could probably play corner in the country. They got Sanchez. They got a lot of great players committed. Naeem Offord. But how many of those guys did they keep? Like, I think Auburn could flip Naeem Offord. He might be the best corner in the country. And there are a lot of other recruitments they're still involved with too. So Georgia's a threat. I think they're the most likely to finish number one, honestly. Alabama's always a threat. LSU's got Bryce Underwood. It's going to be a very close race.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it has been a hot minute since any team outside the SEC pulled in the number one recruiting class. Am I correct in assessing that, or who is the last to
It's
do
Ohio
it? Because
State the last time it happened, I'm sure.
yeah, it just feels like they're starting to make some inroads. Inroads. They being everybody else. Not that the SEC isn't going to still dominate recruiting. You look at the top 10 classes, you still have Alabama in there. Oh, what a surprise. You have Oklahoma, you've got Auburn in there, LSU. But there are some other big time programs that are pushing for that top class and will push for the top class. If I told you right now it was not an SEC team, but not Ohio State that finishes with the number one class in the 2025 cycle, who would you pick right now?
It's not realistic, really. It's going to be one or the other, but Oregon and Notre Dame would be the only ones off the top of my head. Possibly, maybe Florida State. They'd have to hit an inside straight. Those would be the only possibilities. But really, the number one spot is relegated to about 5 schools. We all know who they are. It's not shocking. It's LSU, Bama, Georgia, Ohio State. That's pretty much it. Clemson doesn't sign normally enough high school kids to get ranked number one, but they do a great job with the players they sign. Maybe Texas, but now they're in the SEC, so that doesn't count anymore because they used to be Big 12. That's about it. The number between like 4 and 10, that fluctuates all over the place, but the schools I just mentioned are probably about it.
When you look at this Ohio State class right now, it's certainly going to grow. You could have a decommitment or two. I know that Naeem Offord in particular is getting a lot of interest from other schools, but what is it about this class that impresses you the most? Not just the players that are in it, but the way that that has been put together so far by Ryan Day and his staff.
First off, you got to talk about the corners. I've seen Offord and I've seen Sanchez play. I think they're the two best corners probably in the country. To get the two best in one class is as rare as it gets. These are the kind of guys that can come in and play right away at Ohio State. 6'1" and 6'2". They have the smooth, fluid motion. Those guys are going to play early for the Buckeyes. Then you just kind of look at the class as a whole. They got balance. They need a little more up front on the offensive line, but like they've got really good players and they got some key visits coming up at the end of the month. There's no reason they should finish outside the top 5 at worst, and they legitimately have a chance to finish number 1.
One of the big questions when Kalen DeBoer took the Alabama job was, well, he didn't recruit much up at Washington, which is true. Relative to Washington's recruiting potential, he didn't do hardly anything. There were a lot of players there, and then he brought in a couple guys via the portal, and that was that. And then he just is a really, really good in-game coach. But one of the, I think, fair questions was, how's he going to recruit now that he's at Alabama? And he lost his offensive line coach and offensive coordinator to my beloved Seahawks in the NFL, Brian, and yet here he is. It's still June. A lot can change, but if you didn't know, if you went away from college football and didn't consume any news for the last 6 months, you'd probably think Nick Saban was still there because, they're sitting in the top 5 right now. How is DeBoer and his staff, how are they being received on the trail?
It is a mixed bag. They've gotten some elite recruits, and they've also screwed up some recruitments when they first started the process. They didn't pick up the pieces the way they should. But here lately, they've caught fire. I don't know exactly what it is, but a couple of things to think about. Number one, this is Alabama. My dead grandmother could recruit to Alabama, okay? It's not hard. If you've ever been to their facilities, I have. You've lived in the state, I have, etc. They do not stop talking about Alabama football at 3 a.m. Like, it just does not stop. This state, though, is still up for grabs a little bit. Auburn's made a push. They got a top 10 class, too. They lost the offer. They still got potential to flip some kids. that they're working on, they could end up with the top class after a really awkward start. I don't know how to rank it though overall in terms of the effort because they're still putting everything together and getting familiar with each other. You got to remember a lot of that staff, they're West Coast guys. So I have no idea how well they're going to do down the stretch when they got to try to knock off Kirby for a key recruit in the state of Georgia or something like that. Alabama commonly beats everybody in those. We don't know where they're going to go recruitments. Nick always won those. Is that going to be the case with Kalen DeBoer? I need to see it. But overall, I think they're a little bit ahead of where I had them not too long ago because they caught fire once again.
Let's talk about USC because they have been ratcheting up their efforts on the recruiting trail. I don't think it's accidental or by coincidence that after Alex Grinch gets fired, suddenly USC is in on more high-profile defensive recruits, and their overall recruiting efforts are ticking up a notch. Because frankly, the last couple of classes under Lincoln Riley, they haven't been bad, but they have been nowhere near USC's full potential if they are recruiting at their very best because they have so much talent just right there in their backyard. You look up and USC's recruiting rankings right now in the class of 25, and certainly there's a lot of fluctuation because kids are taking visits and committing, decommitting, and doing all sorts of stuff right now. But USC's class ranking has actually dropped down on 24/7 Sports to the 6th class in the country. What do you think USC is doing right now to find so much success?
NIL, hiring a great defensive coordinator, and you're USC. At some point, if you hire the right coaches, USC is a pretty easy sell. I don't think we've ever worried about them signing wide receivers, running backs, or quarterbacks. That's not going to change. But now that you've got a real DC, it's amazing how, like you said at the beginning here at this segment, they're getting defensive linemen to visit. They're getting linebackers. They're getting all the kids that were going bye-bye. I'm going to the SEC or I'm going to Oklahoma, whatever it was in the last couple of years. Now they're getting those kids to visit, some of them to commit. Now, there's a lot of NIL going on here for some of these kids, and I still need to see it finalized because they got a lot of Southeastern kids. I need to see that on signing day before I'll buy it. Yeah, I'm a big disbeliever in kids from Deep South ending up in LA. It's not a good cultural fit, but that's where the great defensive players mostly are. So I get why they're trying. I need to see that finalized, but they've gotten them all on campus, and they've got a bunch of visits coming up that are humongous. Not only for them, but for a lot of SEC schools like Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, LSU.
Yeah, Elijah Griffin is one of those names, 5-star defensive lineman amongst others. And I'll get you out of here on this, Brian. Can USC have a top 5 class this year with the way other teams are looking? You have Georgia in the mix. We talked about Ohio State and Alabama's there. Notre Dame has been knocking their recruiting out of the park. Oregon has been recruiting at a high level. Is USC with Lincoln Riley capable of breaking through and pulling in a top 5 class?
As long as Julian Lewis sticks with them and doesn't flip to Auburn, which that's right now really hard to see. It's pretty cloudy. There's a chance for it. It's going to come down to those Southeastern kids because they're finally getting some of the California kids to come back in the fold. They'd struggled here recently, but they're also going to have to land one of the kids in California they may not lead for right now. It's hard for me to say that because when I was growing up, they didn't lose many of those battles for like the kids from Mater Dei, et cetera. Oregon and Alabama and several other schools. Penn State just got a Mater Dei kid. I mean, like that.
Penn State got a Mater Dei kid?
Yeah, a corner that was highly coveted. So it's just wild. They can't continue.
That's a heck of a pull. That's a long trip.
Yeah, like in my life, they've never gotten a kid like that from California that I remember. And I started following recruiting around 1990. So that's a long time. But look, USC's on that cusp. Like the change in recruiting on the defensive side is massive. Congrats to them, but now they still got to finish.
Brian Smith, Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network, brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Brian, thank you as always.
Absolutely, sir.
Wisconsin has got a lot of big games, has got a challenging schedule in 2024. What's their most important game? We'll talk about that next. Might not be what you think. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can save up to 60%, which is over half, Just letting that sink in. Buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you want. They've got their lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.